Hi, I'm Lorene. When I turned 5, I thought birthdays were supposed to be shared, especially with your twin. But that year, only one name made it onto the cake. Hers. That was the first time I felt like a guest at my own party. And it only got worse from there. What would you do if your family made you feel like the backup plan in your own life? The sun was soft that day. Not hot, just warm enough to turn the backyard into a space that smelled like lemonade and fresh-cut grass. Balloons danced around the picnic table where Carly sat, her curls bouncing with each giggle, her hands tearing open another gift like it belonged to her by birthright. Maybe it did. I was 5, quiet, careful. I stood off to the side, holding a cup of juice that had already started to sweat in my hand. Darlene, Mom, floated from group to group, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, straightening bows that didn't need fixing. When she glanced over at Carly, her entire face softened, like the sun had chosen to land just on her child's shoulders. She never looked at me like that. Then the cake came. It was big, white frosting, pink swirls, and piped lettering in chocolate. I leaned forward just a little, hoping to see my name etched into sugar. Instead, it read, "Happy birthday, Carly." Just Carly. I blinked, looked around. Maybe there was another cake coming. Maybe they'd split the names. But the plates were already being passed out. Forks hit frosting, candles were gone. I tugged on the edge of Mom's blouse and asked, "Why isn't my name on the cake?" She didn't look down, just said, with a soft chuckle, "We didn't want it to look crowded. You know you don't care about this stuff anyway, sweetie." But I did care. I cared more than anything. I just didn't know how to ask twice. Carly didn't say anything either. She was too busy posing for pictures with her slice, icing smudged on her chin like a crown. As I picked up my plate, plain white with a corner of cake already sliding off, a boy I didn't know tugged at his mom's sleeve and pointed. "Is that your maid?" he asked, nodding at me. Laughter, actual laughter. Darlene didn't even flinch. She leaned in and said, "No, that's Carly's quieter twin. More like her echo." My face burned. I didn't move. I couldn't even swallow the bite I had taken. I just stood there, holding a paper plate like a tray for someone else's celebration. No one corrected him. Not a single adult. Later, I sat on the stairs just inside the sliding glass door. The party noise was still loud outside. Clinking cups, chairs scraping on concrete, but it felt like it was happening far away. I remembered something my mom had once told me. Good girls don't need attention to know they're loved. But what if silence wasn't love? What if it was just a habit they never broke? That night, I found a crayon in the junk drawer and an old notebook from kindergarten. I turned to the last blank page and wrote my name across it. Once, twice, 10 times. So I wouldn't forget it belonged somewhere. Later, when Mom gathered everyone for the group photo, she called out, "Smile, Carly!" Her voice was bright, firm. Dad adjusted the camera. I tried to wedge into the frame, but I was already behind someone. When I asked if we could take one more, Mom waved me off. "It's fine, sweetie. You're in the corner. See?" I was. Barely. That was the first birthday I didn't get a gift. But it wouldn't be the last. It was a Saturday in July, and the air inside our house smelled like lemon furniture polish and too much trying. A family friend had come by. Someone from Darlene's church group, who wore chunky jewelry and always complimented the centerpiece more than the people in the room. Mom was doing her usual performance, pouring iced tea with one hand, adjusting Carly's posture with the other. My sister sat framed by sunlight and attention, the couch positioned so she could be seen from every angle. I walked past the living room wall, holding a plate of cookies, still warm from the oven. That wall had become something like a shrine over the years. Frames lined up edge to edge, perfectly measured, perfectly curated. Carly at age 5 in her ballet recital. Carly winning 3rd place in a science fair. Carly in her volleyball jersey despite quitting mid-season. I slowed down just enough to look for myself. Not even a glimpse. "Don't lean too close," Mom called out. "We don't want fingerprints all over the glass." I placed the cookies down on the table and backed away like I'd disturbed something sacred. Later, as they passed around the tray, the family friend gestured toward me and asked, "Is that your other daughter?" Darlene didn't miss a beat. "Yes," she smiled, But she's more private, doesn't really have anything to show. She said it like it was a compliment, like invisibility was a virtue. Carly giggled softly. Wallace said nothing as usual. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to rinse out a glass. I could still hear every word. Doesn't have anything to show. Last fall, I won a regional writing competition. The certificate came in a cream envelope with a gold seal. I had given it to Mom, hoping she might want to frame it. She said she'd put it somewhere safe. I found it a week later, folded beneath the water bill. I gripped the edge of the counter now, trying to breathe through the noise in my head. Maybe I was a secret. Not the kind kept in confidence, but the kind buried quietly, a hidden child among the curated ones. That evening, I went upstairs and found one of my old school pictures in a drawer. It was from 2nd grade. My bangs were too short, and I looked like I had just stopped crying. I taped it to the inside of my bookshelf, on the back panel where no one else would see. I wrote in small letters on the back, "So I know I was here." No one asked me to join the living room conversation that night. No one noticed my silence. At bedtime, I lay on my back staring at the ceiling above our shared room. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the plaster. We'd put them up ourselves when we were little, using stickers from a Christmas stocking. Carly's side was full, nearly 30 stars. I counted mine again, 14. Even the stars seemed to know who mattered more. The bank smelled like peppermint and printer ink. I sat on the plastic seat next to Wallace, my feet dangling inches from the tile floor. He read the sports section without looking at me once. Darlene stood at the teller desk with Carly, beaming like she was watching her daughter receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. It was Carly's 13th birthday. She was getting a savings account. A real one, with a purple folder that said her name in gold letters, a debit card, and a little PIN number she would forget in a week. I got a peppermint from the teller's desk. That was it. On the drive home, Carly sat in the front, legs crossed, folder clutched to her chest like a diploma. Mom adjusted the air vents for her and played Carly's favorite playlist. I sat behind them, the seatbelt digging into my collarbone. Halfway up our street, Darlene turned to me and said, "Almost forgot," then passed back a small package wrapped in leftover Christmas paper. Inside was a budgeting notebook. Faux leather, brown, cheap. I turned it over in my lap. "It's practical," she said. "You're the responsible one anyway." I smiled, the way people smile when they're given socks for their birthday. "Thank you. That's what you say. Even when what you're thinking is, responsible always meant replaceable." When I opened it later that night, the first page read, "Track your expenses wisely." It felt like a joke with no punchline. Dinner that evening included a few cousins and Darlene's sister Jolene, who always wore too much perfume and complimented Carly's outfits like she was auditioning to be her stylist. The dining room was loud, the air smelled like roast chicken and approval. Darlene held up Carly's folder at the table, explaining the importance of financial literacy in young girls. Everyone nodded, as if Carly had invented saving. I didn't say anything, just picked at the mashed potatoes, wondering if anyone had noticed the folder hadn't left her hands since the bank. Then Darlene laughed and said, "If Lorene ever gets into college, I'll probably have to apply for her scholarship myself." Laughter. Not cruel, just accepted, expected. Wallace added, "That's our quiet little planner," and lifted his glass. I stared at my plate, suddenly too full. No one noticed I didn't finish dinner. That night, I opened the notebook. On the first blank page, I wrote, things I wasn't allowed to ask for: a laptop, dance shoes, a shared cake, a single photo on the wall, one more hug before sleep. It wasn't a ledger for money, it was a record of absences. At school the next day, I got back a writing assignment, an essay about the concept of home. My teacher handed it to me with a quiet smile. "You think like someone who's had to learn too much, too early." It was the kindest thing I'd heard in weeks. When I got home, I slipped the paper into the back of the notebook, not to track expenses, but to track value, my value, even if I was the only one recording it. That night, I lay in bed while Carly clicked through a shopping app, humming along to the same playlist Mom had played in the car. She didn't ask how my day went. No one did. Mom walked past our room and paused just long enough to say, "Turn the light off soon, sweetie." I did, but something inside me stayed wide awake. I still remember how the hallway smelled when the casting sheet went up. Printer ink, floor wax, and the faint, bitter scent of someone else's nerves. I wasn't nervous. I knew I had done well. I could feel it in the way Mrs. Ray looked at me after my audition, like I had finally taken up space in the room instead of apologizing for being in it. Jo March, the lead in Little Women. When I saw my name, I didn't smile. I just took the slip quietly, folded it, and tucked it into the back of my notebook. I didn't tell anyone for 3 days, not because I didn't want them to know, but because I wanted the moment to stay mine for just a little longer. At dinner, I finally said it. I got the part. Jo March. Carly, cutting into her chicken breast, paused just long enough to say, "Oh." Wallace nodded once. Darlene set down her wine glass and smiled like it was an effort. "That's lovely, sweetie. But Joe's such a big role. Are you sure you're up for something that visible?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That week, Carly started coming to rehearsals, saying she was helping with props. But every time I turned around, she was talking to the director or practicing Joe's lines in the hallway like they belonged to her. One afternoon, I walked past the den and heard Darlene on the phone. "She's not ready to handle something that public. We don't want her to embarrass herself." My heart sank. I didn't even need to hear the teacher's name on the other end. A week later, Mrs. Ray called me into her office. She didn't explain. She just handed me a new sheet. Ensemble. Stage left. I nodded, walked out, told no one. Opening night came. The gymnasium was packed with folding chairs and proud parents. The curtain buzzed as it rose. I stood behind it, hidden in the wings, holding a basket of fake laundry, and a silence that felt heavier than anything I'd carried on stage. Carly was radiant. She said every line clearly. She smiled at the right beats. And when the final applause roared through the room, Darlene stood in the front row, tears in her eyes. I clapped too, just enough not to look bitter. Then I walked home alone. No one waited for me. The porch light was off. The house was asleep, or pretending to be. In my room, I sat at the edge of my bed and opened the budgeting notebook. On a blank page, I wrote, I wasn't quiet. I was muted. I stared at those words until they blurred. She said I'd embarrass myself, but I never had the chance. I wasn't even allowed to fail. I was silenced before I could speak. After the final show 2 nights later, the cast went to Dairy Queen. I didn't. I took the long way home. My phone stayed dark the whole walk. At the house, I paused at the front steps, waiting to see if any lights would flicker on. Nothing. I left the notebook on my nightstand, wrote one more line before turning out the lamp. I don't want the spotlight. I just want a light that doesn't flicker when I walk in. The next morning, Darlene printed a photo from the performance. Carly in costume, center stage, arms raised mid-monologue. She framed it and hung it on the living room wall. I stood by the staircase and watched her hammer the nail into the drywall. She didn't ask if I wanted a copy. No one asked if I was even in the play. That night I knew. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being removed. Graduation morning began with too much noise and not enough warmth. I woke up early to set the breakfast table, folding napkins into shapes I'd seen on YouTube. Darlene hovered nearby, checking angles, adjusting plates. We're so proud of you girls, she said, her eyes glued only to Carly, who was still upstairs curling her hair. When Carly finally floated down in a new floral dress, Mom lit up like she was seeing the sun for the first time. Wallace looked up from his phone long enough to mutter, "There's our star." I smoothed the tablecloth without a word, counted each place setting twice. The gifts were on the buffet, neatly stacked. 2 boxes, one wrapped in gold paper with a matching ribbon. The other, mine, wrapped in leftover Christmas paper with plastic tape. Carly opened hers first, of course. A velvet case unfolded to reveal a delicate gold watch, small enough for her wrist, shiny enough to catch the attention of the entire room. Everyone clapped. Mom teared up. Wallace patted her on the back like she'd just signed a college deal. Then came mine. I peeled back the red and green wrapping to find a box that had already been opened once before. Inside was a spin mop. A note taped to the side read, "To my neat and practical daughter." Silence fell for a beat too long. Carly gave an awkward laugh. "Mom," she said gently. "Really?" Mom just beamed. "Lorene loves cleaning. This is perfect for her." Wallace added with a shrug. "Figured you didn't need anything anyway." I folded my napkin and placed it in my lap. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I said nothing. But inside, something cracked quietly. Something important. I excused myself and went into the kitchen, opened the microwave door, and stared at my reflection in the black glass. "You didn't expect more," I whispered. But a part of me had. A part of me had waited for something real. Something chosen just for me, not assigned like a chore. A paper towel sat on the counter, printed with the word "Celebrate" in big curly letters. I used it to dab my eyes. That evening, I took out the budgeting notebook and opened to a fresh page. Across the top, I wrote, "Graduation gifts." Underneath, 2 columns. On the left, hers time. On the right, mine labor. Below that, I drew a scale. A watch sat on one end, my name on the other, underlined, boxed, dark ink pressed hard into the paper. At dinner, Carly kept twirling her watch under the chandelier light, letting it catch and reflect across the table. Wallace asked what time it was 3 different times just to make her show it off. I sat there quiet but not still. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel the pressure in my ears. They thought I would always clean up after the mess. This time, I wouldn't. It was Sunday, the kind where sunlight made everything look kinder than it was. Darlene stood in the kitchen wearing her best mom ever apron and holding a carafe of orange juice like it was a trophy. Wallace was on his 2nd cup of coffee, flipping through a flyer for summer grills he'd never buy. Carly sat in her usual seat, legs crossed, face glowing like she was lit from within. "We're going to Hawaii," Darlene finally announced, like she couldn't hold the sentence in any longer. Carly squealed. Wallace grinned. I smiled the way you do when everyone else has already decided how you should feel. Then came the part that shifted everything. "Just the 3 of us," Mom said, her voice dipped in honey. "We thought you'd rather stay back and take care of the house." No one looked at me when they said it. It wasn't a question, it was a placement. Darlene added, "You have work anyway, and Carly really needs this reset before college." Wallace chimed in, "And someone's got to water the plants. You're the only one we trust." I nodded. I always nodded. The clink of Carly's spoon against her cereal bowl was somehow louder than the rest of breakfast. By noon, suitcases were lined up by the door like soldiers. Carly had a new beach bag and freshly painted nails. Mom handed her the itinerary, printed in color. Dad checked flight confirmations like it was a business trip. Carly got the front seat in the SUV. I stood on the porch and watched them climb in. Darlene gave Carly a kiss on the forehead. Wallace gave me a quick glance and said, "Be safe, kid." I didn't wave. I didn't blink. I just watched the car pull away, its taillights flickering once at the end of the street like some final joke. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A photo, Carly, legs stretched out on a striped lounge chair, drink in hand, sunglasses too big for her face. Caption, "Wish you were here to carry my bags." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the counter. I went outside and watered the plants. Slowly, 1 pot at a time. I touched each leaf like it might speak. They left me behind without hesitation. And somehow, it hurt less than I thought it would. Maybe because part of me always knew they could. That evening, I opened the hall closet and stared at the spin mop I'd gotten for graduation. Still unused, still in its box. I carried it out to the garbage bin and dropped it in. Then I stood there, listening to the echo of it hitting plastic, louder than applause. Inside, my phone rang again. I didn't check who it was. I let it buzz until it stopped. The house was quiet, but I no longer was. I woke up to an empty house, not quiet, empty. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask for anything from you, not even your footsteps. They'd been gone for 4 days. The dishwasher hadn't been run. The living room looked untouched. Even the air felt unused. The note I left sat on the fridge, untouched like everything else. Plants watered, mail collected, house intact. No response. I packed without noise. 1 duffel bag, the notebook, 2 shirts I didn't hate. I scribbled another note, smaller this time. Don't worry, I'm fine. The bus station was only 3 stops down, but it felt like crossing a state line. My hands shook against the vinyl seat. The windows were too fogged to see out, but I didn't care where we were going. I just needed it to not be here. When I stepped off at the edge of town, the scent of lavender caught me first, then the porch, small, white, weathered, but cared for. I hesitated at the gate. Before I could lift my hand to knock, the door creaked open. Henrietta stood there, arms crossed loosely, wearing an apron with flour on it. "I've been waiting," she said. "No why, no where have you been, just that." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old paper. The floors creaked with a kind of honesty I hadn't felt in years. She poured me tea in a chipped floral mug, no questions. I sat at the table, just sat, and she let me. Behind her, a shelf lined the back wall, filled with neatly stacked manila folders. I stared at them without meaning to. "What are those?" I asked. She turned her head, smiled, and reached for one. "This one's yours." She placed it in front of me, gently, like it might break if handled too fast. Inside, a photo of me in 2nd grade with my winning poem, a copy of my first short story, printed in the town newsletter, a mention in the school paper about my science fair project, a napkin with my name, scribbled in purple marker. She had kept them all. "I never stopped watching," she said. "Just wasn't allowed to be part of the crowd." My eyes stung. I pressed my hand flat against the table. "I thought no one noticed," I whispered. Henrietta leaned forward. "You were never invisible to the ones who weren't trying to look through you." I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the pieces of myself I thought were forgotten. Not treasured, just remembered. That was enough. "Can I stay a few days?" I asked, voice small. "You don't have to ask," she said. "You're home." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing. The kitchen smelled like something baked, though nothing was in the oven. It was just the way that house held warmth. Quiet, lived in, steady. I stirred my tea with a small clink, watching the ripples spiral out. Henrietta read the paper. Grandpa Franklin stood at the screen door, hands in his pockets, eyes on the driveway. He walked over without a word and placed something cold and metal on the table. "Keys." "It's ready," he said. Outside, parked under the only patch of shade in the driveway, was a car. Older model. White, with a bit of rust along the bottom edges, but the windows were spotless and the inside looked like someone had taken their time. No frills, just reliable, like him. I stepped outside barefoot. The morning was soft, warm sun, faint breeze, the kind of air that feels like something is about to change. He opened the passenger door for me and I leaned in. "It's yours," he said. "You decide where it goes." My fingers hovered above the steering wheel. The leather was worn smooth and I could smell something faintly floral. Henrietta's hand lotion, maybe. I didn't cry, I just nodded. Later, I packed quietly. Not much to bring. A few shirts, my notebook, the old budgeting journal. I wrapped it in one of Henrietta's scarves, green, with tiny embroidered lemons. I didn't know why I picked that one. Maybe because it looked like something soft that had seen bitterness before. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, but I didn't feel the need to say goodbye. That room never pretended I was just passing through. It had held me as I was, uninvited, but not unwelcome. At the kitchen counter, I opened my notebook and tore out a single page. I used my neatest handwriting, the kind I'd once reserved for school projects and birthday cards that never got responses. "I'm not angry, I just understand now. Thank you for showing me what not to become." I folded it once, then again. No name, no plea. I placed it in an envelope and slid it into the house key tray, the one Mom always kept by the door, even though she never lost her keys. Henrietta didn't ask where I was going. Grandpa loaded my bag into the trunk. They both stood on the porch as I started the engine. "See you soon," Henrietta said. I nodded, smiled, pulled away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. At the old house, the light filtered through the kitchen blinds in golden slats. Dust hung in the air, catching the sun like quiet confessions. The envelope sat waiting. Darlene came in with her shopping bags, heels tapping across tile. She saw it immediately, as if her eyes were trained to scan for things out of place. She picked it up slowly, slid her finger under the flap. Her eyes moved left to right, then froze. The page rustled in her hands. Her hands trembled, but it was already too late to hold me back. The first thing I noticed about the apartment was the light. It came through the windows unfiltered, bouncing off the bare walls like it wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was quiet, not because no one was speaking, but because there was no one to speak for. Just me. I unpacked slowly, a stack of books, a chipped mug, the journal. I placed it last, carefully, like setting down a version of myself I had finally made peace with. The mattress was still wrapped in its original plastic. It crinkled when I lay down that first night, but I didn't mind. The silence wasn't heavy here. It didn't echo with things unsaid. It was just honest. I remembered what I told Henrietta before I left. I'm not running, I'm arriving, and somehow I meant it. Back at the house I no longer called home, the envelope sat where I'd left it, in the tray by the door. I imagined Darlene finding it between grocery runs, maybe right after putting down her purse. She read it quietly. No reaction, no message, not even an accusation to deflect. But that night she opened an old photo album. She flipped past page after page of Carly in dance recitals, Carly at birthday parties, Carly holding trophies she didn't even remember winning, and somewhere near the back there was a blurry photo of two girls on a staircase, one beaming, one blinking. The one blinking was me. Wallace mentioned me once at dinner. Darlene cut him off before he could finish his sentence. Carly returned from Hawaii with a tan and 2 new pairs of sandals. She unpacked in the middle of the living room like a princess returning from war. "Is Lorene still sulking?" she asked, laughing as she dropped her luggage with a theatrical sigh. No one laughed back. I got a text from Darlene a week later. "Hope you're settling in. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't reply. I didn't even hesitate. I just deleted it, not with bitterness, but with the same quiet that used to follow me through every hallway of that house. I opened the journal instead and wrote, "Needing nothing isn't the same as being okay, but it's close enough, for now." At school, during my second week, a professor read my essay aloud in front of the class. It was about silence, how it can both shield and suffocate. When he finished, there was a pause, then applause. I smiled, not out of pride, just relief. I wasn't healed, but I was finally unhurt. Sometimes, walking away isn't about giving up. It's about realizing you deserve more than silence. I spent years mistaking quiet for peace, obedience for love. But healing begins the moment you stop waiting for someone to choose you and start choosing yourself. I'm not saying it's easy, it's not, but it's worth it. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the less special one, I want you to hear this. You matter. You're not too quiet. You're not too much. You're just right. And your story is still being written. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to walk away to find your worth? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this resonated with you. Or tell me where you're watching from. If this didn't land with you, tell me why. Your voice matters here too. And hey, if this story touched you, inspired you, or just made you feel a little less alone, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There are more stories to tell. Yours might be next.